Hi folks, it's Pastor Dave, and I'm glad you're here with us again. This week we're going to talk a little bit about communion, one of the two sacraments of our church, a way in which God comes to us and brings love to us all. So buckle up and enjoy the presentations. So as we said, communion's a sacrament, and sacrament comes from the Latin, basically means sacred mystery, two words put together. We're not going to bother about that too much. Let's just call communion or sacrament one of those ways in which God comes to us in a way that's beautiful and profound, but we don't quite understand. It's up to God to make it work. We don't make it work. All we do is gather around and we say, "Oh my goodness, thank you that you are here." Now, because you are brilliant, you're going to say, wait a minute, you're saying God shows up in sacraments, but isn't God everywhere? Can't I find God out in the woods or at the beach or in the eyes of my child? And I will tell you, yes, absolutely you can, and you do, that we experience God in many ways. However, each one of us is different, and you may go out to the woods and find God. I may go out to that same woods with you and find nothing but moss-covered stumps and a bunch of itchy bugs that I want to get away from. The neat thing about a sacrament is no matter who we are, no matter where we come from, no matter what our experience or background, we can come together and gather around a thing, a time, a ritual where God has promised to be with all of us. And we don't have to have a particular point of view because we don't make that happen. Instead, we lift our hands out to God and we say, "Are you there with us?" And God says to all of us, "Yes." And the purpose of God showing up in sacraments is not to be instead of all the other ways that God shows up. Instead, God shows up in sacraments in order for us to be able to see God and perceive God there so we can see and perceive God in all the other ways more easily. Another way of thinking about a sacrament is God coming to us and showing us God's love in a way we can see, hear, taste, and touch. Even though I think we're kind of built to understand that we're in relationship with something bigger than ourselves, a world, a universe, a mystery, whatever we want to call it, I think that's inside all of us. But we're all human beings and we need things that are tangible in order for us to call them real. Now, God showing up, as God really is, would be kind of problematic. We'll talk about that next time. But God does show up to us in ways that we can easily apprehend and accept. In bread, in wine, in water. In ways that we can touch and experience that give us life and give us hope. Now here's the critical thing. When God shows up in tangible elements. In fact, in our church, one of the things that's needed to make a sacrament is that there's a physical element, along with words in Scripture that say God will come in this way. Now, the reason that tangible element is important is because some churches, some people will tell you that sacraments are simply a symbol. They're simply there to help you remember God or to remind you of God. And there's some justification for that in the words of institution that we say around communion. Jesus says, "Do this in remembrance of me." And people say, well, that means we're supposed to remember Jesus, and that's what this is for. Now, of course, we're supposed to remember Jesus when we do this. That's part of the fun. But that's not all it's about, and it can't be all it's about. If a sacrament is just a symbol, symbols point to things that aren't there. If I have something in front of me, if I'm in the town I'm going to already, I don't need any symbols for that town. I'm already there. Where I need the symbols is when I'm on the highway, on the way to the town, and I'm not there yet, it's not with me, so I need a symbol to point the way. If we say communion or sacraments are just symbolic, what we're saying is God's not there. And that's an awfully funny thing to gather around. Hey, yay, God is not with us. Also, what happens when we can't remember? What happens when we don't understand? What happens, let's say, when we age and lose some of our mental faculties? Is God still present with and loving someone whose mind isn't working quite right? What happens if we're depressed? What happens if we're young? What happens if we're distracted? What happens if we forget? Does God's power go away because our mind isn't tracking right? I would argue it's essential to say no, that God is still here with us, loving us and caring about us every single day of our lives, no matter what. Therefore, we say that when God comes through communion, God is really there in a way that's beyond us and our understanding, but with us as well. And that's the beauty of it, that we don't make it happen, but it cannot be taken away from us by anything in the world or even by anything we think, feel, or experience that day. That's enough for now. Join us tomorrow when we talk more about the bread and wine that God comes through in communion and why that might be significant.